Hi, and welcome to the AdNug podcast, the podcast of the Adelaide.net user group. I'm your host, David Gardner. This is the recording from our September 2023 meeting, Revolutionizing Online Retail with Blazor, with James Chapman-Smith and Donald Urquhart. And now over to the presentation.
Just before I get started, contrary to what may have been mentioned before, we are Discount Party Supplies. Discount Party Warehouse is a competitor. Obviously they're doing a very good job with getting their name out there, so a mistake that a lot of people do make. Actually, we get a lot of people do ring up our customer service and complain about an order not arriving or whatever like that, and we end up finding out they've actually bought from Discount Party Warehouse, but they've found our number and called us, so it is a bit confusing.
Oh, is that not realised those two separate companies?
There you go, yeah. It happens a lot. So, good evening, everyone. My name's James. I've got Donald with me. Donald's our lead developer. I'm one of the owners of Discount Party Supplies. Also got, I'll point him out, Maker in the audience. Give us a bit of a wave, another one of our developers in the company. So what we're wanting to do this evening is to go through, actually before I do that, we were talking before about AdNug. Last time I presented was 2010. I'm now getting quite old, but enjoying this nevertheless. All right, so what we're doing tonight is talking about ultimately getting to Blazor, because I think Blazor is a really interesting piece of technology. How many people use that? All right, so some of you are going to be in for a bit of a treat, I think. Blazor, going through the presentation today with Donald, I just love the stuff it does. Like, some of it's almost like magic. Right? It's inexplicable to someone with, what am I now, 25 years of .NET. I was in the early betas and everything. It's just amazing stuff. So what we want to do is go through the history of what we call Byblos. Byblos is our internal system that's the ERP system, basically runs our business, allows us to scale up and be a bigger business than we've ever been before. It does all our ordering, stock movement in the warehouse, basically everything to do with a piece of product moving around the place. We started out with LinkPad. Anyone use LinkPad? Oh, another treat for tonight. I love LinkPad. It's an exceedingly good tool. I'm going to show you a little bit about what we've done with that, just to give you a bit of a flavour and a taste. So that is part of the presentation. Another thing that we're going to do is we're going to talk a bit about one of the key technologies that we've implemented called the lot management system, just to give you a bit of an architectural look at that, because I think that's really quite brilliant. And then we'll get onto the Blazor, Byblos, MongoDB side of things. Can you tick me on? So I think that's pretty much it. So talking about LinkPad, a little bit about the lot management system, the foundation. Then I hand over to Donald. He knows more about this stuff than I do for Blazor. Then we'll look at the Byblos overall architecture and look at Blazor in a few steps. So we'll do some out of the box. If I hit run, what do I get? And then a few little demos leading up to showing off the actual app. Now, as we go tonight, I'm going to get David to be judge, but if anyone asks a really cool question that is, not like I love your hairstyle or anything like that, we've got these bags of, all sorts of goodies in here. It's a bit of swag. So if you're throwing a party, this will be a perfect idea for you. So please have those questions come up. All right, let's go next. All right, introduction to LinkPad queries. So I just wanted to show you what got us into this mess. Hang on a second while I play with technology.
I do like that you called it a mess. It's not that bad.
Okay, so as I said before, I'm a developer for many years. Early, pre-beta for .NET, started with VB.NET, saw the light, went to C#. And then when my wife decided to sell a few things online in 2006, I started getting involved and really started doing a lot of the back end. It's PHP, it's Magento and all that kind of stuff in the back end. Tried to avoid all that. So this thing here, everyone's seen sort of Kitty and Putty and all those kinds of things, surely. It's an SSH tunnel pointing to the back end of our Magento database. This one's actually pointing to our staging server, but in our business, it's pointing live to the Magento database. We have read-write access to it. Apparently that freaks out a few developers. So I can, drop all tables and all sorts of things if I wanted to. I don't tend to do that. But that SSH tunnel gives us the ability to start jumping into LinkPad. So on the left up the top there, you can see Commerce Staging 2. There's our database, all the tables are there. I can now start running C# queries directly against the database. And one of the things that LinkPad lets us do, and here's just a really simple, small LinkPad program. Right, it's just an anonymous variable. When I run that, it does some nice dumping of stuff out on the screen for me. I don't have to think twice about how I display stuff. So, as a sort of a simple example, if I'm connecting to the database, I'm looking at the sales order item table, I can run a simple link query. This is just going to grab the latest orders in the system, get the latest 10 individual orders, and then I get to dump it to screen. All right, so when I run that, it goes off to the SSH tunnel, executes, comes back, and dumps stuff out. Now that's kind of neat and tidy. C#, and it's full on C#. So there's a void main. I can add classes. I can do everything I can do in a normal .NET program. Now I can even go one step further, and I've lost it. Where'd it go? Closed it down. It does all sorts of very cool things. So that's right. I have to go into .NET in LinkPad 7 because I'm using. There we go. So it lets me dump all sorts of stuff. I can dump WPF. I can dump WinForms user controls, and I'll show you that in a second. But I also dump SVGs. So I went to over to ChatGPT and I said, ChatGPT, could you please create me an SVG of a flower? I pasted that in, basically hit run, dump. There you go. That's what ChatGPT thinks is a flower. So it lets me do all sorts of cool things. I do all sorts of charts and sales information, etc. And I have all sorts of lovely charts that I've created with SVG just simply by rendering it and dumping it into LinkPad. It's a really crappy user interface for most users with all this stuff around the outside, but the bit that goes on there can be quite useful. So to sort of give you a bit better idea, here's an actual program we use in the business. In LinkPad, this is the interface that the users get. And every morning they use this. What did we do? We did website?
Yeah, you can do website.
Did website. So this is what we actually do use. This is not real customer data, but this is what we use each day to validate shipping addresses. So jump into all the orders that are pending in the system. This is just a WinForms control. I've just dumped it to the screen. I'm using RX to go off and validate shipping addresses with Australia Post, and I've got full. There's some telephone numbers that are incorrect. This is just running a regular app. So as far as a user interface for our customer service team, this is what they use, and it's worked quite fine. It's created boatloads of files over time. I won't run this because it's going to take a minute to run. But this here is the tool that we use to generate picking sheets for the warehouse. All right, it's only a little bit of code, but that tool is used and it generates this kind of stuff. So I end up with HTML files, XML files all over the place. We used to hit print them out. People would run around the warehouse with pieces of paper and pick from locations and so forth based on this. It's all now done in Byblos and it's all done electronically, and Donald will sort of show you more about that in a tick. But I just wanted to sort of really in here point out that we've ended up over time generating. I can show you tons and tons and tons of queries in here. Oh, I haven't got my ones. Okay, tons of queries in here in LinkPad, and it's been absolutely bloody fantastic for enabling us to scale and do things at a short notice. It's very quick and easy just to do new and start writing code. All right, any questions on that? Because I promised swag for people to ask questions. Byblos has come about because of two things. One is our e-commerce manager. She's from Lebanon, which Byblos is a city nearby, so she wanted to have that sort of name. But the other thing is the famous library of Byblos, I believe. So this word bibliothèque comes from the word in English. So we thought it was a library of everything that goes on in the warehouse, so that seemed to make sense. Does he get a bag? He gets a bag. All right. Donald, do you want to run up the bag?
I can run up the bag. I've got to do something today.
All right.
Thanks, Donald.
There you go.
Sorry? I'll get there in a tick. All right. All the customer service staff use it. Management uses it. So they've been sort of told, don't edit the text on the top bit, just do it at the bottom bit. It is a really crappy user interface, but it came out of a natural sort of thing. So as soon as I found out I could go to the tunnel, I started writing queries, and eventually I created a bunch of them, and I started saying, hey, here's a cool query. You should have a look at this. Oh, can I have that? And next thing, all of a sudden, everyone starts getting the queries, and then you start developing up tools, and you go, well, you got this tool for doing this, and now I can show you all sorts of stuff that'll make your toes curl.
Queries and stuff saved in the one shared drive.
Yes.
My security brain's going crazy right now. If people are running that against, live databases and stuff, because we run an e-commerce site as well. And
yeah.
We're a provider of software, not.
There you go.
And Donald back there too.
We actually provide software, so we've got,
You asked a question?
Correct.
We can't use tops.
So the queries by themselves don't have any passwords in there. They're stored securely.
Yeah.
You need the tunnel to be open, and you need a file that's on the file system that is partly the key. So you need a password and you need the key.
Okay.
So I could hand you the queries, and you can't really do anything with them. It may give you some hints as to how to hack the system, but I don't. So we are sort of aware of that.
I haven't used Linkpad, but there's a Linkpad, can you lock the code? Because if customer service is using it, can people by mistakenly edit the code and break it?
We've got it all running under Git, so all the source for all the queries is run there, so we can go ahead and see what changes people have made, and occasionally they do. But we then can fix it pretty quickly. It's been fairly robust to that kind of change. So, no one's really destroyed it too badly, have they?
No, I had someone come to me the other day because I accidentally put a plus at the very start and it wasn't syntactically correct.
Yeah. So you get all sorts of weird things like that. But it usually is not a problem. Cool. All right. Wanted to quickly talk about the lot management system. This is just an architectural thing that we think is really cool. It's part of Byblos, and it's sort of the foundation, if you like, for how everything in the warehouse works and how we've built Byblos on top of it. So I just wanted to give you a quick example. Hopefully it's going to be fairly quick, and then get Donald onto Blazor. But we have this concept of the warehouse. So I'm taking this as A as being a receiving area, B as being where products are stored ready to be picked, and C is where it's being dispatched from. All right, so that's sort of the model I've got here. And I've got this concept of void. This whole thing adds up to 0 and always adds up to 0. So when I... do you want to jump across? Do you want to do the thing? I'll yell out.
Yeah, I can do the tap.
So we have the concept of moves in here. So every move has got a GUID. It's got a timestamp. It's got the SKU or the product that's being moved, the quantity being moved, and where it's going from and to. All right, going from the void to A. So at some later time, that's 1342. At 1408, I've got a second move. Same product, 5 is moving from A to B. So in other words, I've received in 5, I've taken it and put it into the main part of the warehouse. Then the third move, someone's ordered some stuff. They've ordered 3 of those products. So 3 of them are moving from B to C, so going to dispatch, and they go get packed and shipped out. So the 3 are moving from C to void. All right, can we just jump to the next? So that looks like this. Moving 5 from void to A, I get -5 and 5. Still adds up to 0. Next. A moves to B. Still adds up to 0. Next. 2 plus 3. Take 5. Still 0. So we've now moved from B to C. And then the C disappears from the warehouse. And now we've got 2 and -2. Now the cool thing that this does under the hood, and this is what I really like about it. Go to the next slide, Donald. So when we look at the actual moves, these things get recorded once and stored. This is CQPRS, CQRS kind of stuff.
Read something.
Yeah, command read, whatever. So these get stored and written once. They do not ever change, right? So that gets recorded. I can go back and get how many we've got of these? 11 million?
Oh, 11 million move events, yes.
11 million of these move events recorded so far. Every time we get a move event, it goes and creates these lots. So this is the lot management system I talked about. So we had the -5 in void and we had the 5 in A in that previous diagram. These get created so that the create GUID matches the move, and there's a destroy GUID that is null. If it's null, this is an active record in the system. So if I move to the next move, right, remember I've moved 5 from location A to B, right, and that's the move there. So now the destroy GUID here too matches the GUID of this move. I immediately know that record is no longer a valid record as far as where something is now. Right? If I want to see where it is now, I look at the nulls. Right? If I go to the next slide, right, I moved 3 from B, so B got destroyed, number 3 there. I create a new B with 2, and now I've got this one down here with quantity 3 in location C. Create GUID, destroy GUID. So again, the greys up there with the destroy GUID are not valid at the moment, but the ones that are light grey are valid, the ones with destroy is null. And go to the last one. So then when that product ships out of the warehouse, right, the move goes ahead and does the same thing. I've got the destroy GUIDs, destroy GUID, and a null. And you can see from this the only 2 records that really matter at this point are the -2 and the 2 that we saw at the end of that previous slide. What's really cool about this is this gives us full traceability within the warehouse of every single move throughout time. And we have 30 million records like this in the system right now. Because it is also immutable, effectively, except for this destroy, and these are definitely immutable, we can run these 10 million again through the algorithm to build this data set up from scratch if we wanted to at any stage. So if we discover we've got a bug in the system, stuff something up completely, we just run the whole lot again and creates it all. So at any particular point in time, if I look at any one of these, I can see create 4, there's a destroy. I can just map that right the way through and get a full directed acyclic graph of every single move out of 30 million records. It's particularly cool. It works really well and it scales. All right, Donald, next.
Awesome. My turn.
And so that's me out of the way. Thank you very much for listening. Now, there was one more. You did ask me a question, didn't you? Sorry, I don't want to skip that. So jump on to Donald. He's going to go through all of Blazor and so forth. He's the one with the more meaty code, and he's going to be more interesting. Let's go.
Well, I hope so. So I'm going to go through why we picked Blazor. I'm then going to go through... I'm blanking already. What have we got? Yeah, why we picked Blazor. The Byblos architecture for the code that sits behind our front end. And then I'm going to go through some actual examples with Blazor, as James mentioned, out of the box, some JavaScript interop, SignalR, and then what we're doing in production. Cool. So why we picked Blazor. If you were a C# dev about 3 years ago, you would have heard of Blazor. It was in every blog post. It was all the rave. So effectively, you can run C# in your web browser. You can also compile C# to WebAssembly, run that in your browser as well. Not only that, you can then go and you can debug WebAssembly in your browser as C#. So it got a lot of hype. So that led us to kind of explore, do we want to use this? We wanted to build a, sorry, I'm jumping ahead, interactivity, the C# interop, C#. Sorry, this is the first time I've ever done this, so please bear with me. C#, we're C# developers, so we wanted to kind of jump on the idea that we could use C# in the browser because it was natural for us. The JavaScript interop, so that's the ability to talk to and from JavaScript with C#. Security, because it's got some pretty nifty security out of the box. And then control, because it gives us control over our code in more control than a standard JavaScript SPA or single page application. So interactivity was one of the key drivers for why we went to single page application and Blazor specifically. When I started at Discount Party Suppliers, I was handed about 30 pages of hand-drawn diagrams and how they wanted this thing to behave for the picking feature alone, and then that nice little graph over there of all the different flows between the system.
You like Panic?
We do actually have Panic, but I've renamed it because we thought that was a bit jarring for users. So Blazor is effectively an SPA. It's a single page application. It is built for really quick updates to the end user. We wanted something that would also, at the same time, Blazor is based on SignalR. Many people here familiar with SignalR? only a handful. So SignalR lets you open a WebSocket connection to a client directly from the server, and you can send updates back and forth between the two. And it does that in real time with a few fallbacks to just standard polling methods instead of WebSockets. It's pretty cool.
We've got a demo showing that, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah. And we wanted this picking system. We had so many ideas. Like you could put a tablet on a trolley that you're walking around the warehouse, but you can also wear a mobile device on your arm and have the two talk to each other in real time. Where do I have to go next? Then go down the aisle. Oh, I can see on the tablet what I'm actually after. So it gave us really quick updates to the interface and the ability to talk across multiple devices really quickly. C#. So as I mentioned, we're C# developers. It's natural for us. It's familiar, and it's not JavaScript.
You like JavaScript?
I don't think anyone likes JavaScript.
Ben, you. Actually, one of the things I didn't sort of talk about before with LinkPad, but there's a thing called My Extensions in LinkPad, right? It's like a include file, if you like, the one and only include file that you get. So over the last, 10 years or so, that file has got incredibly large with loads and loads of really good code in it, right? The nice thing about doing Blazor, it's all C#. So we copy and paste our My Extensions out of LinkPad, basically. It's very little editing involved at all.
Yep.
Right, we've got it worked out so that the same code works in both. So copy and paste it in, and all of a sudden all this library of massive amount of code is immediately available to us straight away inside Blazor. It was pretty cool.
The downside to that is you've got a My Extensions file that's many, many thousands of lines long that you have to maintain.
Yeah, it's a bit long.
It's a bit long. But yes, not JavaScript. We can work our way around HTML, JavaScript, CSS, but at the end of the day, we don't want to be playing with it. We're C# developers. And having familiarity in the past with Razor Pages, ASP.NET Core MVC, and a little bit of Xamarin Forms, when I did touch on Blazor, it seemed like somebody took both of these technologies and kind of mushed them together, then put them on steroids. It's a really smooth experience, and it works in your browser across every device pretty much that you've got in your pocket. Next up, we've got the JavaScript interop. So this gives you the ability with Blazor to call native JavaScript functions. You can write JavaScript code, you can have a .js file in your assets or www root folder, and you can call functions from that with C#. Taking that to the next level, you can then actually pass data between C# and JavaScript, which in my mind, that's kind of mind-blowing. And because Blazor was so new when we jumped on it, like 3 years ago, this was still in preview. The hot reload didn't work. Gosh, you couldn't even focus on an element in a page. So the JavaScript interop gave us a safety net, effectively, that we could fall back to any function in the web browser from C# if it wasn't supported in Blazor. And that gave us the courage, I guess, to jump onto Blazor so early on and take that gamble. Next up, we've got security. So we've got a desktop version of Byblos that is aimed for, I guess, admin users. It does a lot of Excel things. Things that were in Excel, we took and we put in ASP.NET Core with Razor Pages, just basic CRUD operations. And over the top of that, we put Microsoft Single Sign-On with the Microsoft.identity.web library. And it turns out that just works with Blazor as of .NET 6. The exact same code, the exact same NuGet packages, just works. So we get out-of-the-box security in Blazor, same way we do with the desktop. So one of the other deciding factors was control. In a standard JavaScript single-page application, anyone can open your developer tools, view all your front-end code. Not only can they view your front-end code, if you're a little savvy, you can edit that code and then run your own JavaScript on the front end and do what you want. We don't have that problem with Blazor. So we're using server-side Blazor specifically, as opposed to WebAssembly client-side Blazor. And because we've got that WebSocket connection between the client and us, there's no API endpoints. No attack vectors in that regard. So we don't have to maintain the endpoints, we don't have to secure the endpoints, we've just got a WebSocket connection. So we've got control over the code's not being let out there. We don't have an API. And two other really cool points, property binding to elements. So standard ASP.NET Core Razor Pages and MVC, you've got model binding to your page. The whole page is bound to a model. Well, in Blazor, every single property you've got is individually bound to whatever you want in the page. And that allows real-time updates to the interface from the C# and back the other way. And because of that, you don't have a whole page bound. You don't have form posting. So there's another attack vector gone. That's kind of making a comeback in .NET 8, but we won't be using it because we don't have a need for it. We're looking for every action has a reaction. We're not looking for do everything and then submit it all at once. So we picked Blazor because it gave us the interactivity that we needed based on the designs that we had. We're C# developers and we wanted to work with C#. We've got the JavaScript interrupt as a fallback in case we get stuck. It gives us out-of-the-box security, the same as on the desktop, or our desktop version, and it gives us control over our code. So I'll jump onto the actual architecture for the back end of our Byblos system. So this is where the lot management system, for example, that James mentioned lives. So we've got desktop version, Byblos. We've got our really well-named warehouse version, Byblos Warehouse. That runs on mobile devices. And I touched briefly, the Byblos desktop version, ASP.NET Core, it's just standard Razor pages. It was meant to replace Excel files. And it's meant for your more managerial admin tasks. It's got some reports in there. Nothing overly fancy. Byblos Warehouse is where we utilize Blazor server-side. We're mobile first, so we've got this running on everybody in the warehouse has a device on their arm that is serving up this application.
Strapped on like that.
Yep, 100%, just like that. Strapped to your arm with a scanner in your other hand. Well, actually, we've got gloves. We should have brought one. They look pretty cool.
Like Spider-Man gloves. Well,
Exactly.
more of a beep, but, you know.
Yeah, there's a beep. And we'll actually give an example of the beep. But it runs every single operation in our warehouse. Every single one. And both of these are running in an Azure virtual machine, on IIS, and behind all of that is a monolith, but we've built it kind of uniquely, so it's very microservice-y. So the Byblos architecture itself is, we've forced ourselves to code. We've got one big project, effectively, that covers most of this. We've got an API gateway layer. Anything from either of the front ends has to go through this as a gatekeeper to get back-end business logic. We've then got multiple services. So every service is built using a domain-driven design. We've got a picking service, a packing service, a supplier service, a SKU service. I think we've got about 22 of them at the moment. None of the services can talk to each other. API Gateway manages all coordination between tasks and data flow. Inside of our services, we've got our business logic. Pretty straightforward. We've got repositories. So repositories can be pretty much any type of data storage that we want. Most of them are Mongo. We've got some, historically, if they're reading off of the link-pad-based systems, they're XML or text files, things like that. And then we've got various event handlers within the service, because underneath all this, we've also got a RabbitMQ event bus going on. Again, really aiming for that microservice-y type feel, so that in the future we can pull this thing apart and scale as needed. Then, because it's all...
Sorry, Donald. The cool thing about this is the link pad stuff was like a 747 in flight, right? And then we needed to upgrade the engines. So a lot of this stuff has basically done that. We keep running the business on a day-to-day basis. So on Friday we're using LinkPad and Monday we're using Byblos. So a lot of these things were, repositories using XML to get upgraded to Mongo, but all the time the business has to run the very next day. It can't not. So it's been an interesting sort of exercise in migrating across from the... It's an ongoing migration that will never be complete.
It'll get complete one day. I have faith. But a good example for that is our picking system. James showed a query that creates our picking batches, and that output a whole bunch of XML files, text files, HTML files. Byblos, the picking service, was initially built with a repository to read those XML files, and you'd just pick from the XML and it would write back to the XML. Then we updated the query itself to write directly to Mongo, turned off, swapped out the repository, and it all just kept running. No changes to the front end, nothing. It's all really smooth cutover. I think it happened in a day. Anyway, we've also got various shared projects. Usual microservice type application. You'll have one service is built in Python, one's in C#. They'll all have their own little representations of data. This is all C#. We've got a small development team. We've just got a bunch of shared projects that share the classes. So one thing that architecture allowed us to do, because everything's forced to go through the API gateway, is if we wanted, and we actually had to at one point as a kind of proof of concept, you can actually put an API over the top of that and then switch from Blazor server-side to client-side Blazor using WebAssembly. So we had some issues out in the warehouse at the end of last year, a lot of connectivity issues with devices. So Blazor server-side maintaining that WebSocket connection, when that was interrupted, the whole screen goes white and you get a reconnecting screen. To kind of come up with a proof of concept while we were tackling that issue directly, in less than a day, with just a couple of line of code for each function, we were able to swap out Blazor server-side for client-side Blazor, the idea being that because you don't have that constantly open WebSocket connection, it can't disconnect. There's only issues if you try to submit and for some reason it can't talk at that exact time. So, our architecture allowed us to very, very quickly come up with a proof of concept that we don't have to use server-side Blazor. We could go to WebAssembly if we really wanted. And the general logic for the Razor pages in the Blazor project were virtually identical.
So it's like 3 lines of code that changed it from fat side client to thin side client.
Pretty much.
Yep.
Yeah. There are a few little niche changes here and there, but overall it was just copy and paste.
All right, now for the good stuff.
Yeah, for the next part of the presentation, we're going to go into some actual Blazor examples. For those of you that haven't seen it before, I'm hoping this is going to be exciting, even though it's actually quite basic. But these are the building blocks that, once put together, run our warehouse. Okay.
Don't forget there's 2 bags left.
Yes, if anyone has any questions.
Oh, here we go.
I really wanted that. Do you have any systems that optimize the order in which shipments are picked or packed, or like optimizes the way that people going through the warehouse? Or?
Yes.
100%. James wrote all that, if you want to touch on that quickly.
So there's a whole bunch of stuff that we want to do, and I can briefly describe one of the cool things I want to do. But the key thing that we did is, because we don't have an optimization of where to go in the warehouse. What we have is a standardized route. All right, so you go up the warehouse that way, and you come back the other way. Right, and if you've got to pick items from any of the shelves, you're going to go past each shelf just the once and once only. If there's no items that you've got to pick for 3 rows, you bypass those rows. So it's fairly good that way. What we found, though, think of it like a postie route. What we found, though, is when we run that batching stuff I did before, typically that batching stuff, in particular on a Monday morning, might create 30 or 40 trolleys worth of picking. So we have a trolley with 8 baskets, and it's like a baker's trolley, right? So you could have 20 or 30 of those, and it starts out like a race. You get all the warehouse staff start in bay 1, right, with all their trolleys, and they start going, and you're bunched up right at the beginning. So one of the things that we did is, because the route has an index, we can index it just like an array that's been wound up. We can unwind it. So what we ended up we started doing is batching together orders that on average were in that section of the warehouse, or that section of the warehouse, or that section of the warehouse. So now when people start, they were almost immediately going to a different part of the warehouse and staying unbunched from each other. And that was just one very simple thing that we did. But the other stuff that we want to try and do is, because we know how long it takes people to walk, we've got shitloads of data, right? We know how long it takes to walk, how long it takes to pick things. We want to start predicting where people are going to be within the next hour. So I can say a trolley's here now, it's picking these items in this order. I think it's going to be there in 23 minutes. Now, if I can do that, I can then... what I can then do is, if you wanted to go pick, you grab your device and say, give me a batch. It will work out where the warehouse is going to be empty in the next hour and picks the orders that will make you go to those empty spots. So you'll sort of slot in and synchronize with everyone picking and slot out, and you won't go past anyone. That's where we want to get to, that kind of, that's cool shit.
What made you write your own using
So the issue was a couple of things. So the trolleys that we use got 8 baskets on them, right? And when we go around pick, we'll pick get 2 of this and put it in basket C, 1 of those put it in basket A, etc. By the time we finished, those 8 baskets would have 20 or 30 orders in them, right? Every system that we found out there would let us pick one order per basket, or have one big shitload basket and put as many orders as I want into it. None of them let us do hybrid of that, right? So that's one of the reasons. The other one is I ended up going over to Booktopia and talking to the CTO there, and he said, "You guys have been writing this stuff yourself. You've got in-house skills. Do that." And he rattled off a bunch of companies that have went out and bought, massively expensive systems, implemented them, had to change the business to make it work, all that kind of stuff, and then threw them out after 2 years because it was just too hard to work with. So doing it ourselves has meant that we've been able to do whatever we need to do, and it's become more and more efficient over time.
Yeah, the efficiency there's a really big one. So we had all these pre-existing systems, and when I first came on, the idea was piece by piece I would replace the systems as they were. And then we got to the point where, well, why are we replacing systems that aren't optimized when we can optimize the systems as we go and rebuild them? And that's actually led to a lot of efficiencies out in the warehouse at this stage. So I will now jump over to some examples if we don't have any more questions. We're out of goodie bags. Yes.
I saw you used made desktop first and mobile first. So is it PW or desktop and mobile?
So the desktop version of Byblos came first. As I mentioned, it didn't need the interactivity. It was basically just replacing Excel files. And Blazor being so immature at the time, it was really slow to develop with Blazor. Hot reload just didn't work. So ASP.NET Core, Razor Pages was just a quicker development cycle off the bat. Then as Blazor became more and more mature, we're getting to a point now where we're thinking, maybe we just get rid of the old Razor Pages version and convert the whole thing to Blazor.
And the other side to that too is that diagram I showed up before with A, B, C. In reality, we've got pre-orders, orders, invoices, in-transit, warehouse, the warehouse shelves. There's a whole lot of layers to it. So the first few layers is all about ordering stock. So we use virtual locations to track the movement of stock through the virtual warehouse. So when it's an order with a supplier, we count it as stock that's with that supplier. Right? When they send it on an invoice, it turns into an invoicing virtual location. So we can watch movement of stock through the warehouse from the point when we want to order something to the point where we have it come in. So we can then say across the system, because you saw how whenever I didn't have a destroy GUID, I could say that's stock we actually have. Well, we could see what was actually on order, what was actually an invoice, what was actually in transit all the way through. But all of that stuff that was virtual didn't require someone in a warehouse with a device. So we could write all of that part of the code in the ASP.NET stuff at the front end, whilst Blazor was becoming mature enough to then go on to do devices out in the warehouse.
Yep. Does that answer your question? Any other questions before we move on to some examples? Nope, let's do it. Okay, so our first example for today is really, really simple. We're going to push new project. We're going to pick a Blazor server app. We're going to walk through this little wizard, and we're going to see what it does. Next. We're not going to put any security on this at this point in time because that is just a pain to set up with Azure off the bat. Once this is done, I've installed the latest Visual Studio 2022 preview that came out just the other day in the hope that .NET 8 would just work with the Blazor template, not without some fiddling of the actual project file, so we're just going to do .NET 7. So what we get here if I run this, hopefully it compiles quickly.
As with these things, you test it in the office, you go, the presentation looks great, but 10 seconds to compile doesn't seem like a long time, but when you're doing it live.
Awesome, that's now come onto my other screen. Let's shove you over. Okay, we get a hello world in Blazor. So this looks very, very basic, but what it's doing is it is kind of Blazor is rendering all this on its side, and then it's sending you the interface. And your browser is then rendering the interface that it has been sent from Blazor. If I go to counter here, we've got a button. We push that button, we see a number increment. Looks very, very simple. You can do it with JavaScript, but this isn't doing it with JavaScript. This is doing it with C#. So that click me button is sending off a request, and I can't actually show you the full request. But if I bring up the network traffic here, I've got that set to WS, WebSockets. Reload that, there we go. So we can see our WebSocket connection. Progress bar is sitting right there. If I then press click me, it's jumped up. What's that done is it has sent off a request to the server. It has said, I want this action to be performed. It's performed the action and then sent back whatever it needs to the interface to show you what has happened.
Show us the code. Show us the code.
I'm getting there. If I can find my mouse.
I love this code. This is so good. It seems too simple, like it couldn't possibly work.
Give it a stop. So anyone familiar with ASP.NET Core, you probably recognise the structure. You've got program.cs, you've got some pages. In here, we've got counter. Open that up. So we have
What?
private variable current count. That is rendered to the front end with the app directive there. And we've got this function here, which is C# bound to the onClick event for this button. So it's using JavaScript to pick up the onClick. It's saying, oh, I need to go make this request to C#. It's making this request, and because we've bound this property into the page, you automatically get an interface update. You don't have to do anything. It just does it.
Is that pretty cool or what? It's pretty cool.
I think it's pretty cool.
So where is the state actually stored for this? Is the state stored in the browser or in the
On the server itself. So the server stores a virtual copy of the DOM effectively, and it will manipulate that virtual DOM based on the changes to these properties, and then it will send those DOM changes through to the client.
So if there's a server restart or something,
You lose your connection, you lose your state, they have to start from scratch.
what do you wait for? And you have that.
Yeah, generally we don't see that problem unless there's actually like a network interruption.
Unless the WebSocket connection drops. So it'll literally sit there for days and days and days.
Yep.
And it's just active. As long as the server doesn't restart, the process on the server doesn't restart, or the WebSocket connection doesn't time out, it'll just sit there.
Yeah, so there's what's called a circuit ID that gets assigned to you when you load the page, and that circuit ID is used to link you up to the state on the server itself. And as long as that exists, you can connect. SignalR itself also out of the box gives you various retry logic. So there's like, I think it's a 30-second default retry. I'm going to get these numbers totally wrong, but it's got retry logic in there. So that is example one. Very, very simple, but in my opinion, very, very cool. So our next example, we're going to go ahead and we're going to use the JavaScript interop. So we used this very early on for our picking system, where if you go to Woolworths and you scan something at the checkout, you get an audible beep. We added that beep into Blazor using the JavaScript interop to call, or to play the audio on an element in the page. So we're going to set that up from scratch, hopefully, in this example. Now, I'm going to do it in this exact same project. So somewhere over here, I've got some files. Ooh, this doesn't have a scroll wheel. I've got some assets here that I've pre-set up. I've got two audio files, one for success, one for error. Very important to tell people when they're wrong as well as right. And I've got a JavaScript file here. I'm going to copy both of these folders over into the www root for my current project. This one. And you can't see that. There you go. Awesome. So that'll automatically get picked up in here. And just to show you what's in this JavaScript file, we've got two functions. We've got play error audio and play success audio. All it does is we've got an element in the page that is an audio element that has the link to the file itself. We're going to put that in. It's going to pause anything that's playing. It's going to reset it, and it's just going to play it again. Very, very simple. So let's jump over to, let's create a new page. Let's copy fetch data. Let's rename that to audio. Change this over to audio, just for fun. Okay. Then we're going to put two elements in the page. don't like it when things aren't quite right. Yeah, it's going to be annoying. Awesome. And we don't need any of that. Okay, so this @page directive up the top, that tells you effectively the route that you use in your address bar to get to this page. Let's just change that to audio so we don't have any clashes. Get rid of all this other stuff we don't need. We don't even need that one. Awesome. Now that we've got two elements in the page, we want to actually play this audio. So we're going to put two buttons in this page. We've got play success and play error. Now what I've done here is this says this is going to run in C#, effectively. We're going to run this C# code. So I need to create two functions, play success audio and play error audio in C#. So we'll go down here, we'll create a code block. And we're going to chuck in some scaffolding functions I put together earlier. So now, if I run this and click these buttons, it's going to run these functions in C#. It's not going to do anything though, because there's nothing in those functions. What we're going to do next is the JavaScript interop is available in Blazor just automatically out of the box. We're going to inject an instance of the JavaScript runtime into the current page when this page loads. And then we're going to use that JS runtime in these functions to actually play the audio. So we've got this invoke void async. There's quite a few different JavaScript interop functions you can use. I've mentioned you can pass data back and forth between. Void just says this isn't actually going to return anything. So that's fine. It's just going to call this function and leave it at that. Then we're effectively going to do the same down here for error. Play error audio. If we give this a run and cross our fingers, hey, it ran. Now I put the URL as audio, so we'll jump straight to /audio. Didn't put a menu in there. 59 /. Awesome. Now if I push play success, unhandled error. What? Oh, that's...
Who was feeling nervous for Donald as he's going with this?
Me. What have we got? That's okay. I've got one up ahead earlier if I need to show that.
JavaScript file into your host file.
Ah, you're right. You are 100% right. Okay. Let's stop that. We've got our JavaScript, but it's not loaded. Host.cs.html. Okay, so this file is effectively where if you've got any CSS files you want to load in or any JavaScript, you do it here. That is the one step I didn't write in my notes. So let's do that. /scripts /audio.js functions. Okay, let's see if it can now find that. Audio. So this is what happens when you actually lose the connection and the server restarts. Okay. I actually don't know if I get audio. I get audio. Hey! Look at that. And play error. So really simple code to put together, but that feature has become invaluable in our warehouse. We released one, I think it was replenishments, so the ability to take things from bulk and put them on the pick face locations, and we didn't include that beep. Instant ticket, instant complaint, we had to fix it. Oh no, did I bump the box? We've got a little box here that is actually, what's it doing? It's recording, capturing this. And it's a bit wonky. Okay. Let's jump on to example number 3. So I mentioned Blazor server-side is all powered by SignalR. That's all it is. So we're going to use SignalR now to do a live update between two different screens, something that we use in the warehouse right now. This is actually very important for our replenishing team and for our packing team because we usually get two people working on the same lot of work at once. let's go ahead. Let's go copy paste. I'll just create a new page, and I'll call that signal R. We'll come back and we'll use that. So signal R is going to require us to install a NuGet package. It comes natively, but you still have to say that you're going to use it. Client, that one there. Awesome. Once that installs, we have, come on, apply. Accept. Signal up. Okay. So, where's my... Sorry, bear with me. Okay. So we've added our NuGet package. SignalR uses things called hubs. A hub is, it maps to an endpoint, and that endpoint is then used for, I guess, broadcasting and receiving those messages. So we're going to create a hub. As per the Microsoft documentation, let's create a folder called hubs. Make it nice and neat. And I'm going to create a new class. And this is just going to be, let's call it a move hub. James showed us moves in the lot management system. We're going to submit a move, see that in real time on another device. So public class move hub here. This is where we're going to define how we send commands through SignalR. So I've got some code that I've already written up, quite a bit of code. We're going to want to send a move event, effectively.
You removed your inheritance from hub.
That's what I didn't I? I'm glad you're on the ball. There we go. Okay. So we're going to send a move. We're going to send a GUID relating to who sent this. We're going to say where an item came from, where it's going to, what that item is, how many of it were moving, and what time it was moved. If all goes well, this is going to be picked up in real time on the other end. Down in program.cs here, now that we've got a hub, we are going to map that hub. So directly after we map our Blazor hub, is where we map our new hub, and each hub would have a distinct endpoint. Okay. Now we've got signalr.razor, let's actually start writing some code in here. It's all our scaffolding. Make it pretty. Okay. So the move event, as we saw back in the hub, has multiple different parameters here. So I'm going to create properties for each of those inside of our actual move page. So here's some I prepared earlier. We'll put those in a code directive. There we go. So we've just got a sender GUID. It's going to be distinct to whoever loaded the page. We've got from, the to, the quantity, and the SKU. Then we're going to need some HTML elements in this page that we can then bind to these properties so that we get these updates. Okay, so this is going to be mostly HTML. Awesome. So we've got an input here for the SKU. They're all just text boxes. Input for the quantity, from, to, and each of those are bound to our properties down the bottom here. So if we update these properties, we're going to see that here, or in this case, vice versa. Okay, so I'm also going to define a new class here, and this class is going to be called move. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to store a list of moves, and every time SignalR intercepts a move, or receives a move broadcast, then I'm going to add it to a list of moves. And that list of moves is going to update in the page dynamically bound to a table. So now that we've got our moves class, I'm going to create my list of moves. And then I'm going to need a spot in my page to actually render those. So I'm going to create a table. Put it under all this.
It's kind of cool that it's not observable collection, it's not binding list, it's just list.
It's literally just a list. So we've got a table here, it's got some headings, and it just iterates over the list of moves and outputs the move. That's all it does. There's nothing here that says we need to update anything in particular or refresh the data. It will just happen in real time. Next up, we're going to inject another property into the page. This time we're going to inject Navigation Manager. So the Navigation Manager is going to work out the current URL you're on, and it's going to then, well, not the current URL you're on, the absolute URI of your application mapped to the hub that we had before. So in program.cs we have move hub, and in our SignalR page we need to then effectively subscribe to that. Navigation Manager is going to help us do that. Don't have to use it, but if you're switching between multiple domain names or running locally versus production, it helps. Then we're going to add a new property here for our hub connection itself. So this is the SignalR hub connection. You should tell me to add a using. Perfect. And then to set up SignalR, we're going to override a function that Blazor gives you called onInitializeAsync. So when you first hit a page in Blazor, this code is run. And it's effectively used to set up the page. We have found in production sometimes things aren't quite ready when you get to the onInitialize function, so there's an onAfterRender function as well. It lets you pass, that accepts the property that whether or not it's the first render of the page. Sometimes things aren't instantiated until the first render, so you can't use them, so you can't finish setting up your page. In this case, not going to be an issue though. So we've created our hub connection. We're going to start, well, we haven't created it, we've defined a variable here for our hub connection. Let's go ahead and actually put in some, don't want to double call you, go away. So this is where we use our navigation manager. It's just taking the current absolute, well, it's taking the endpoint that we want and making it compatible with the current URL you've got. This and this is all you need to actually just start SignalR. It's not going to do anything, but it will start. So we're going to need something now to actually fire off these moves. We've got our properties here, but we've got no way to actually send them off to SignalR itself. So up above our table, after our form inputs, that's a nice little spot. Let's add a button. When they push this button, it's going to call off some C#, it's going to perform the move, it's going to fire that off to SignalR. SignalR is then also going to receive that from the other client, and it's going to do whatever logic we tell it to. So let's set up our move queue. Okay, so if our hub connection is not null, we're going to go ahead and we're going to send a new move when this button is pressed. We're going to send the GUID that was created when you loaded the page, so that we can identify whether or not it's your move or someone else's. In a production environment, we actually find it's important to know whether or not you performed an action. We're going to go from to the skew, the quantity that we're moving, and we're just going to pass datetime.now because it happened now. Okay, so that's going to fire it off over the hub. Let me just copy this. we need a way to actually receive that. So I've got this little placeholder here, hub connection handlers. So what this is saying is that on the receive SKU move, so this is sending the SKU move, and signal R in our hub has a function, send SKU move. It's going to fire this off, and it's then going to broadcast to everybody that you have to then receive this SKU move. So intercept that receive SKU move. We've now got a little function here. It's going to accept the sender GUID, the parameter 2, the SKU, the quantity, and the timestamp. Now at the moment, this is not going to do anything. It's going to read the message, but do nothing with it. So let's get it to do something. When we receive a new move, we want to just add it to our list of moves. We've got our list that's already instantiated. We're going to add a new move, and we're just going to define the properties. And that's really, really straightforward. Where this may have a hiccup, and I'm going to add some code in here to prevent it happening, is Blazor requires that all your rendering happens on the main thread or effectively the current synchronization context. And it's going to see this move, and it's going to update the property, but it's not going to update the interface because you're possibly running on a different thread. Now, Blazor has a function called state has changed. You can force it in some cases, well, any case really. If you need to, you can tell it, update the interface. And it will try. But this has to be run on that main thread, the main rendering thread. So to get around that and ensure that it happens, they have provided a handy little function called invoke async, which will take the function we give it and ensure that that runs on the primary thread. Now this isn't so much an issue with WebAssembly because you've only really got one thread, but server-side Blazor, we can do what we want. We can have a million threads running. Probably not a million, but a lot. And this just ensures that state has changed around the right thread, won't throw an exception. Now, I think that's actually all the code required to get live updates. We've got our hub. We've added the hub in program.cs. We've created the hub connection. Got a way to receive the event, publish the event. Okay. Let's run this and cross our fingers. If all goes well, I'll be able to fill out those text boxes here. I'll be able to push my button, and I'll be able to get live updates on a different window. Let me just shove this over to the side. It's over at /signal_r. There we go. Looks very, very basic. Now let's jump over to a new guest window. Let's just show that we're not doing anything silly. Awesome. Now, if all goes well, I'm going to fill in this left-hand side, and it's going to appear in the table on the right-hand side. So let's pick SKU back 1 that we had in James' example before. Let's move 5 of those. Let's move it from the void. Let's move it to location A. There we go. That is a live update across devices, which is something that we are actually using in the warehouse right now. Very simple. At the end of the day, very simple. But
do it the other way around. Do it the other way around.
The other way around?
Yeah.
But very powerful. Signal has been around for a long time. It's really cool to see it being leveraged in Blazor. Let's move from B to C. There you go, other way around. There's no fancy
cool, huh?
business logic, no data storage, but you've got live updates. Awesome. Now, the last example for today is just going to be the front end, I guess. On the desktop version, we use the Bootstrap framework. So CSS styling and JavaScript. We don't want HTML in our Blazor, we want C#. So what we did is we looked around and we looked at all the different component libraries, and we decided on MudBlazor as kind of the closest representation of Bootstrap that we could find, but it was using the material design frameworks. We've got a little inconsistency, but we can deal with that. We just wanted to get rid of all of our HTML and JavaScript. So we're going to add MudBlazor in here. We're going to create a little user interface, and then we're going to show you what it all looks like when it's pieced together in production. So let's add a NuGet package here. We're just going to look for Blazor. There are quite a few different component libraries that came out when Blazor first started. Luckily, this one has stuck around and is doing quite well. There we go, Blazor installed. In program.cs, we now need to add, under builder.services, we're going to add Blazor in here. Yeah, Blazor is, I think it has 6 different resolutions that it targets. So just like Bootstrap supports multiple resolutions for different screen sizes, so does Blazor. Okay, this hopefully won't take too long. Really quite handy having all this prepared. Okay, builder.services to add mud services. This tells us that we're going to start using Blazor. It's just a requirement of the library itself. We're going to jump over to main layout.razor over here. And shared main layout.razor. And effectively, we're just going to get rid of all this. We don't want HTML. So the theme provided here is a requirement of Blazor. These other ones are optional if you want to use some extra features that it provides. I won't show them off, but we do use them. And now we're going to put together a basic user interface. We have here various Blazor components. We've got the mud layout, mud app bar, which will sit across the top. We've got the mud main content, which is effectively the main body of your page. And we're going to whack a container in there to hold our page content. At body there is filled in by each of these Razor pages. That will just happen. We don't effectively have to do anything more than this. So I control Z that. It's about the same code, 20 lines. But no HTML. We're going to now jump over to put in, we're going to put in a sidebar. You've got a little icon up the top left. We're going to push that. We're going to open a drawer. Actually, you know what? Let's give this a run first. And I may need to include some JavaScript. There we go. Very, very, very basic. Looks worse than it did before, but it won't for long. Okay, Blazor has some JavaScript functionality, so we're going to jump over to our host.cshtml. As you can see here, out of the box, Blazor uses Bootstrap. We're not going to need that, but we are going to need Blazor. So underscore content here is telling us that it's just coming from the NuGet package that we installed effectively. That's been set up for us by Blazor. Then Blazor has its own CSS, so that Bootstrap one that we killed off, we're going to add in the Blazor CSS. That's this page. Okay. And if we jump back to main layout, we're going to add in that icon and that drawer. So effectively what I'm building here is very, very similar to our production environment. So up in the top header bar. So the drawer, okay. Yeah, I'll leave that there. My drawer. Okay, so we've got a component here called a mud drawer. That's just going to slide in and out based on this boolean that we are about to set up. We're going to chuck in an app code block down here. Okay, so I put a couple of links in here just to kind of make the menu look like it did. Got index, fetch data and counter, so we can get to just the native pages that come out of the box. If I run this, I can now open and close my drawer. Awesome, we are getting somewhere. Okay,
it's pretty cool.
Sorry?
That's pretty cool.
I think it is. I quite like it. Okay. We are now going to jump over to, you know what, let's test the hot reload. Let's just leave that running. Let's jump over to, if I can find it, index. And let's get rid of all that. We don't want any of the HTML. Paste this in. Mud text, it's effectively a wrapper for a block of text that I'm putting in there. Typo here lets me define, this is going to be a heading 1, and that's going to translate to, Blazor is going to take this component and it's going to render the HTML for us. It's going to know that it's the H1 that we want rendered. So if I save that, and assuming hot reload worked, hey, hello world is there. Look at that in real time. That is such a lifesaver. When Blazor first came out, it didn't work. You had to stop and rerun your application every single time. Nice. So I'm just going to chuck a couple of other pieces into this page just to kind of show some of the different components. We've got mud divider, effectively just your HR HTML tag. You can assign classes on there, and those classes will just be CSS classes. You can also add styles on there if you really want to start digging into, I guess, styling and CSS. Anyone familiar with Bootstrap would know that you've got rows and columns. You've got effectively 12 columns across that you can utilize, and that's basically exactly the same with Blazor actually. You define a grid, and then each of these items is effectively a column. You don't have to define separate rows if you don't want. So this is going to give us 2 columns, each of them taking 50% of the screen. Let's chuck some content in here so that we can actually see what's happening. On the left-hand side, we're going to put just some text. On the right-hand side, we're just going to put what's called a card. This card's going to have a header, and it's going to have a button, it's going to have some text. Let's save that, let's test out hot reload again. Hey, look at that. There's some text inside of a grid. The button over here doesn't do anything, but we have it. And then the absolute last bit of this demo is I'm going to whack a table in here, and I'm just going to bind the table to a C# property in the page. So under our mud grid, let's whack in a mud table. So we're going to tell it to bind to a property called skews. We'll set that up in a second. Header content, row template, no HTML. I cannot stress that enough. Code. Let's see how far we can push hot reload with all this. Add that in, save that. Oh no. Yeah. They're improving it every day, but still got some way to go. But there we go. We've now got a table bound to a property with C#. I guess that's the end of that example. We have no HTML.
Is the mud Blazor, so by default the theme is the material theme? Are there other themes with it? Or?
No, you can override the theme if you want,
Yep.
but out of the box it's just material.
Right.
Yep. Does anyone have any questions?
How good have you found the automatic responsiveness of mud Blazor? I've tried with Bootstrap and I'm still found it a little bit janky, particularly with tables.
Actually, I've found it pretty good, as long as I don't go outside of the bounds of the device that I'm using, because this is running on just phones attached to people's wrists. And if I'm not going longer than that, I don't have any issues. We don't really use it we don't rotate our devices, they're locked to a landscape view. Yes. Any other questions? No? Awesome. Hopefully you found that a little fun.
Have you ever run into an issue where the mud Blazor stuff didn't do what you wanted? And you had to add HTML?
Things like the audio element that I showed you before for the JavaScript interop, that's not something that comes natively with mud Blazor. But generally, no, it does pretty much everything we want. And if you want a custom element in the page, then there is a mud element that lets you define, is this a div, a span, a image, something particular.
And does it have its own set of prices? Because I noticed you had that margin top where it was, you had margins and stuff in the prices.
Yes, yeah, it sure does.
I mean, they're the same as Bootstrap prices, so that has their own built-in ones, does it?
Yeah. In the documentation, it will go through all of the. I won't bring it up and go through it, but yeah, it comes with a lot of out-of-the-box classes, just like Bootstrap does. Yeah. Awesome.
Did you just immediately go with Blazor, or did you just get SIG HTML? What was the decision?
Just imagine someone getting sick of HTML.
The decision was, I don't want HTML, I want components, because Blazor was built for components. And I looked around at quite a few different component libraries. There was a paid one, I think, at the time, and then there were a few little ones. There were a lot of components that did one thing. Like if you want a table, you go get that library. If you wanted something else, you get a different library. Blazor was the one I found that did everything that I wanted that Bootstrap did. So yeah, it had tooltips, it had tables, it had popovers, modals, everything I needed.
So like when you hit from project like Blazor, you just like load that straight away. You didn't even try, we wouldn't even start the project with HTML and then go.
No, didn't start with HTML. Yeah. I knew Blazor was, because they were advertising it component-based, I needed a component library. I went to look. It was the only one I found that ticked all the boxes. I'm sure there are others out there now. I haven't looked.
How advanced is the Gridder? Because we use some Fusion components.
That's the paid one, isn't it?
Sorry?
Is that the paid one? Yeah.
Well, there is a community license, but if you're eligible, that obviously sort of interacts with HTML as well. But the key for us was a powerful grid, because we've got a lot of grid-based data.
Yep.
You know, and it had automatic Excel exports and column choosers and virtualization of large data sets and all that kind of stuff out of the box. So.
Definitely not that powerful.
Right.
No. They have expanded the tables recently so that you can't do exports, but you can at least do filtering and sorting and basic things like that. Yeah. But for what we're doing in the warehouse, we don't need those advanced functions. We put those over in the desktop version where we use JavaScript data tables. And that includes your CSV export and things like that. Awesome. Anything else? No? That's kind of it. Oh, I didn't. True.
Can I just, can I introduce?
Oh, go for it. You can drive.
So
I can click.
I want to tie back into earlier when I talked about those moves, when I had the moves from, the void A, B, C. Right, so we got up there a move. That's the basic thing that you can do in Byblos out in the warehouse, is to move stuff. And we can model the entire life cycle of a product from pre-order, ordering, invoicing, right the way through to dispatch out the warehouse. Do track and trace the whole way through, purely with just a move. All the other features on there, I think pretty much all of them on that main screen that we saw before, are UI that's layered over top of the moves, that perform the moves underneath the hood, but give you a minimum amount of effort to make that happen. So, for example, when an order is coming from a supplier and we're receiving it into the warehouse, there's a button for receive. We can say, here is the virtual order location that it's coming from. It's now in the warehouse. Under the hood, all these moves occur, but the user's just got a couple of buttons. So everything we're doing, or most things we're doing, basically comes down to moves. Right.
So
Go, Donald.
I've set up a basic move here. We're going to bring in from that void location that James showed us, we're going to bring in this product, which just happens to have a barcode that is askew. We're going to move it to this location in the warehouse, and we're going to move 5 of it. If I push submit, it says it moved it. Let's double check. We have this table down the bottom that tells us the current locations. 5 in 0101 H2. So that has effectively moved a product just immediately using our lot management system.
And one of the cool things, this negative business, I talked about the void having negative. It's actually a feature that we use in the system. So one of the design goals is that staff shouldn't be stopped working if they're doing something that's impossible, right? So the example would be, I receive in some stock, I'm expecting 24 of something, right? And I've got a pallet on the ground. I'm assuming I've got 24 in that pallet. My staff go along, they grab that pallet, start breaking it down, scanning it, moving it, putting it onto a trolley, taking it away. They scan 36. Right? That trolley now has -12 on it. The pallet has -12 on it. And that's pretty cool. So what the staff can do is at the end they can say, yep, done. Clear, that pallet's empty. I can visually see there's nothing on it. But the system will have -12. Or the other way around, we get undersupplied something, so it's got 6 of something on there. So a manager at that point can come along and go, well, hang on, that can't be true. And they can then start dealing with what does that mean. Meanwhile, the staff's done their job. They've counted the product, they've taken it to the shelf, they've put it on, they can move on with their next task. So those negatives actually become really quite important.
So I mentioned this runs pretty much everything we do in the warehouse. So we can look up information about a product, a location, we can move products around. We've got our replenishment process of putting things from our bulk locations into our pick face locations. Picking, so those picking batches that are generated with the queries also feed into Mongo. We read that and we can then walk around the warehouse and effectively pick our items. This is one of the first features that was actually rolled out into the warehouse. So here's one I've started before. Sign into what trolley you're using. Say we're using...
So a trolley's a location, scan products onto a trolley.
And we've got 2 options here. We can start with the standard, which is just the first location in our warehouse according to that index that James mentioned earlier. Or we've got dynamic here, which will work out where the majority of the products for your pick are and start you where the majority starts. If I start that, let's actually shove this down to this is what it looks like on a mobile device. We got that red light. And we're coming back. Yeah, so everyone in the warehouse that does picking sees this. It tells you where you have to go to next, what you're picking next, the quantities. Up here is the actual location you're going to now. This location you're going to next. And effectively they will just walk around with their trolley and they will scan things and away they go. You'd like to be able to see here, if I type in this barcode and get it right. Actually, let's get it wrong. Where's our audio? Oh, there we go.
We saw that demo earlier.
We did, exact same audio. But if I do 9, 3, 1, 2, 1, 6, 5, 9, 0, 3, 3, 4, 0. Hey, it's all good. Now they can pick it and move on. And this follows our picking route and just goes all the way around the warehouse. Tracks their time, they can pause what they did last. Sometimes they can't find an item, they'll send off an alert. And then they'll say, we're missing one item, but you can still go and start packing the rest if you want. And a manual override for complete. We're having no luck.
Sorry, I have a question.
Yeah.
So how often do they do the picking? Is it in their shift? Is that all goes here? Or do they get a report that is I already do the picking?
They've kind of got a schedule out in the warehouse where the warehouse staff will come into a computer and they'll say, we're ready to generate a new lot of picking batches. They'll run the query and then the pickers will be told, look at your screen, and they'll go and pick a batch and go for it.
We have multiple batches get run throughout the day. And it can be international orders or express orders or regular orders or, there's a whole bunch of different sort of variations. Click and collect at the front. So throughout the day, all day, there's batches being run and done out in the warehouse. Replenishment's done during the day. We have emergency replenishments. So if you've got 3 items on a shelf and 5 get sold, someone will know they have to go to bulk and bring it down. So there's a function there for doing that. So all those type of things happen on demand as the day sort of goes along.
What else have we got? I mean, it's all just basically more and more of the same. We built it for fat fingers, jump through replenishment, same 3-column setup. It's all mud Blazor, no HTML. We've only written the JavaScript for the JavaScript interop for the audio. Everything else is just native to mud Blazor and Blazor itself.
Can you show packing?
Can I show packing? I think I even set up a pack. Oh, look, we've got heaps. Let's start a new one. It needs a trolley.
What is the warehouse? A noisy environment?
Only because of the music.
Mm.
Stupid Sonos speakers blaring away all day. It's not that noisy. It's party supplies. Yeah, it's the poppers and all the people drinking champagne.
Let's turn off that. Packers use a tablet. They get a much bigger screen. Get rid of that menu. So this is a pack that we need to do. We've got all these order numbers, the baskets that the products live in, what the batch number is, because sometimes things are split over multiple batches, which means multiple trolleys, the number of items in that order, and an estimated weight. Once we go into that order, effectively what they'll do is they'll go to basket A usually. They'll start at the start, pick out an item, scan it. It will tell you what order you're going to pack. It'll highlight that item, and you pack everything. Once you've packed everything, or as you go, you can ship if you want, we've got a ship button up the top. So this actually takes everything that you've packed so far, coordinates with Magento, coordinates with Australia Post, ships it off, then prints off a shipping label at a printer right next to them on the desk.
Anyone do any shipping with Australia Post or any other carriers? I'll tell you one of the cool things we're doing at the moment, or next quarter is on the cards. So we're shipping with Australia Post only at the moment, costing about $2.5 million a year in shipping. And we've started looking at Couriers Please and Toll and all these kind of things, and we reckon we can save $500,000 to $1 million by going with other carriers, as long as their services are good enough. But the interesting thing we're going to do is have live feeds off to each of those carriers to work out the price for shipment. But we're also going to have live feeds coming back for when items get delivered. So this is party supplies, right? It's not fresh food, but if you've got a party Saturday and you order Monday and it arrives the next Monday, it's too late. It has to get there. So we want to make sure our carriers are doing the right thing. So we're going to be monitoring real time when orders get delivered so that we can update our estimates on the website, so that we can ban providers. So if Couriers Please isn't delivering to a certain postcode or region, we'll just cut them out from that region. We're going to load balance so that we're load balancing so that we know that at Australia Post we have to do $30,000 a day, Toll we have to do $10,000 a day. So we're going to allocate across to, so it's all going to be dynamic and like it's just going to be freaking fantastic. And save a lot of money, which is going to be yes. I have the second person that said that today.
All of our complaints are all Couriers Please. They do save us money. They save us about $1.50 per shipment, but it's weighing that up against complaints versus
You got.
I can't see the time they deliver it. It's the ones that they'll take 2 weeks. They'll deliver it to the wrong address.
And that's exactly the kind of thing we're hoping to capture in real time. Yeah. And then be able to update our website so that the estimates on the website actually show that.
Yeah. Is the problem that the Couriers Please, not Couriers Thank You?
I'm going to remember that one.
We find in Australia Post, because we sort of have sporadic fulfilment on our stuff. So we do memberships for sports clubs. So we'll have, over a month, we'll have, the grey Australia Post hubs. We might have, 30 or 40 of them going out a day, and we'll email our account manager or the pickup guy and say, we've got 30 tubs going, and a guy from Australia Post will rock up without a sack truck, without any, and go, oh, what, all that?
Yeah.
Oh, what, I have to carry that down the stairs? Well, there is a lift, and then I can't borrow your trolley. They don't actually pass on the information that we give them, and it's a disaster.
Trying at the moment to see if Signal R will work in our sandbox. And hopefully it does. Grab that. Show it over there. Pack that. It clears off. So we're going to have 2 people packing the same trolley, and it updates live on the other screen so that we don't have people accidentally packing the same order twice. Anything else in particular you want to show off, James?
Probably. We can show that off. Go back to picking.
That's built into our picking so that people stock take as they go.
It's what we used to do at the end of every day when everything was picked. We used to run through a daily stock check where anything that was 8 or under that had moved since the last daily stock check, which obviously could be Friday to Monday, or we might skip a day for whatever reason, but anything that's moved in that last time, we would run around the warehouse, we'd print out shitloads of paper, run around the warehouse and count everything. Because online retail, if you sell stuff you don't have, you're in trouble. So we would do that, and it'd take 2.5 man-hours every day to go through that process. So what happens now in a pick, and I don't know if we've got a...
I can move something out of a location so that we don't have enough.
So,
Let me just reload this one.
so as people are picking, they're going around, they're being told to go to this particular location, find this particular item, they've got the picture, they've got the SKU, they've got the barcode, they scan it, they put it into the trolley. The system will tell them at that moment in time, there should still be 3 on the shelf. Please confirm there are 3 on the shelf at the time that they're there picking. And they will go ahead and go yes. Now, if it's not correct and they say it's something else, they get to move on with their job. Again, the philosophy is they don't stop and wait and whatever. A manager will then run along and figure out what the hell's going on so that we can get it right.
Let's do this one.
Going to work?
Got a human readable name and a barcode. Okay, let's throw away quantity of this. Wrong SKU. Let's jump over here. Okay, there we go. We've got 32. We want that less than 8, I believe, stock take to be triggered. So let's just throw away 30 of those. Yep. Yep. Now we're on 1. So this is our white reusable plastic plate number 4. Go back to number 4. Cool. Now we've only got 2 of that available in that location. Let's scan that barcode. Oh, let's pick 2 of those. Pick. This is our stock check.
Stock check required. Before you can move on, you need to count what's on the shelf.
This is what you picked, that's what's left. Double check, enter the number that you find actually in that location. And that sends off alerts and reconciles the actual location itself in real time. So it says there's none remaining, but if you say there's 1 left, it's going to update it to 1 and send off the alerts so they can look into why there's 1 left.
And we very, very rarely have any out of stocks or incorrect quantities because of that.
Yeah.
Do you know how much time it takes to ring a customer and say, hey, I know you ordered 9, but we've only got 8? It's a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of mucking around, so we want to avoid that. So that system does it.
Help.
I haven't looked at the help, so I'm not sure what that's going to be like.
So help talks to our support service, and the repository for our support service is Jira. So anyone who submits help automatically gets a support ticket lodged to IT, which is effectively me. And you get a number of gold stars for how many tickets you've submitted. That comes straight back from Jira. But yes, it's more if you have an issue out in the warehouse, you submit a ticket and IT gets that immediately and can follow up.
So again, the philosophy is you don't have to stop doing what you're doing. You just hit help, put this ticket in, move on.
Yep.
Unless it's a stopper.
Yep. Unless you actually can't move on, then you come and see us.
Yep.
With the stock check, if there is an inconsistency for whatever reason, and you enter the real number, you say that immediately, I'm assuming that's coming, so that's a move of some kind?
Yes.
Where's that move coming from or going to?
It's coming from the void?
From the void, yes.
Yeah. So that void around the outside literally does exist, and literally the system has an immutability that everything adds up to 0. Right? So if you find that something's wrong on the shelf, it can come from the void. Right? There's a number of things that we want to improve in the system. So some of those things like that where you've got a negative number or whatever, should be that we move it from find why has that happened. Right? And if we can't, then we move it from the void.
Yeah, in this example, we don't actually bring it in from the void. I got that wrong, sorry.
Yeah.
So we bring it in from a discrepancy location attached to that current location. So you actually end up with a negative in a location related to the current location that you can follow up on.
As soon as we get negatives in the system, that's a cue for a manager to go try and fix up what the problem is, and that's what lets everyone get on with their jobs.
Yeah.
And then when you're resolving that discrepancy, then you would avoid that discrepancy.
Yes.
Correct.
Yep.
Or you discover that the person couldn't count. Yeah. So there's all sorts of things that can go wrong, but typically people get quite good at counting, and the efficiencies for this go up. One of the cool things, we used to do it with the paper-based system too, is on the paper-based system, when you started to pick, you'd write down what time you started and what time you finished, and we have someone doing data entry to do everything. Now it's all obviously electronic, so we know because of you authenticate with your Microsoft account. We know when you say start, and we know when you say end. So we have stats for dollars picked per minute, items picked per minute, dollars packed per minute, dollars, So we have leaderboards. One of the cool things I want to be able to do, and we haven't done it yet, and it needs more staff and more time and money, but I want to get a big ass screen, something maybe like this kind of size in the warehouse, that has a live leaderboard for the day. As people are picking who's going up the ranks for getting faster and, all that.
You really need to build in a little buzzer into the phone, so whoever's on the bottom gets a zap.
Yeah.
Really add some incentive in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So this is an example of where we use the data that we capture on the warehouse version to actually give reports to, managers. Yeah, this is all just in our sandbox.
So the problem with building a big system is the bigger it gets, the more you can do with it, and the more you want to do with it. But what I think is the coolest thing about anything, this is like, the old, go back to medieval days and you build a castle. How your architecture is good for a castle, thing doesn't fall over. Right, and that's exactly how it used to work. They didn't have engineers back then. They had people who sort of had a rough idea how to build a thing. We've got engineers, this thing's not falling over. It's a strong castle, it's really quite good.
Everything was like really smoothly, like rather than being about like database, like you use MongoDB. So was there any particular reason, like why
I started suggesting Raven, but Donald didn't like Raven.
Raven was so slow when I tested it.
So
way too slow.
So you then went...
Well, I had a bit of back and forth with you about all our data is relational. Do we just go MySQL or SQL Server? But no, we stuck with the document idea, and Mongo was the best performing with a C# driver or C# library.
what was like SQL Server?
Sorry?
SQL Server?
Don't use it?
No, like did you use it?
I've got experience with that in the past, which is why I thought all our data relates to each other. We could use it. But no,
I've also had experience
with the microservice-y type architecture we've built.
Yeah, and I had experience with relational databases before, and because data relates to each other, it makes it a big mess after a while. And then when you start putting, stored procedures in there, and now half your code's over there, and half, it's just a nightmare. Once you get to a certain point, it's the castle falls over. Right, and I think microarchitecture and having separate MongoDB collections and stuff like that, I think is actually what's enabled us to scale and make it work.
Yeah, if we ever have a service that needs a relational database as its repository, it can if it wants. It has that flexibility as well.
So how's all this tied into your customer-facing website so that the inventory is all kept up to date there, assuming that your customer-facing website isn't running off MongoDB back-end that you're picking?
Still MySQL.
Yeah.
I won't jump into the invoices because our sandbox is based on production. But effectively, we receive an invoice from a supplier, and that creates a whole bunch of stock in a virtual location. We then use this Byblos warehouse on the devices to receive from that location. And as we receive from that location, we work out, is this a new product that needs to be listed? We put things in a listing virtual location. Or if they're existing in Magento, we put them in a stocking location. We then expose those quantities for those SKUs through an interface, and people can tick, 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 stock that in Magento, and it will push it up.
And think of the virtual locations a bit like, you watch The Matrix where Neo gets his weapons and those shelves go spinning on by. That's the virtual warehouse that we got. So every supplier is basically an aisle and every order is a bay, virtually. Right? They don't actually exist, but that's sort of the way that comes across. So when you receive stuff in, you've got that kind of virtual location. And one of the virtual locations we've got is a Magento location. So that's where we keep the Magento side of stock. And then we're looking to see, basically do live reconciliations of that at the moment. Yeah. Ultimately, that'll go away, and Byblos itself fully will be Byblos will fully be the repository for quantity. At that point in time, when it's really Byblos is doing that, and Byblos is managing orders and doing all the things that Magento still does for us, Magento will become a dumb client. And when it becomes a dumb client, then Shopify or BigCommerce or anything else can become the new dumb client. We can have multiple websites with the same stock at the end. So that's sort of the big picture goal.
Yeah, this is just an example of a report that pulls data from Magento and our lot management system and says what doesn't match. Where do we have quantity that we could sell that we don't actually have, or vice versa? How
many maintaining it? 1 plus wherever Maker went before.
Yeah,
so two at the moment, maintaining the code. I tend to still get into the link pad stuff. You know, I make things worse on a daily basis by adding more code to the legacy system. So I do that side of things predominantly. Donald does get into that, but I think under sufferance. He prefers to do this side of things, but the interface continues to work. Cool.
All right. Well, what do you think again?
And well done for Donald. This is his first presentation to any group ever, from what I understand.
Hi.